Welcome, everyone. Before we begin, let's take a moment to acknowledge that many of us, along with the people and communities we serve, live and work on the land of the Coast Salish people. We must continue to show recognition and respect. Good morning. My name is Trinity Parker. I'm Senior Vice President of Marketing Communications and Public Affairs at Symetra. I serve on the Board of Trustees for KidsQuest Children's Museum, and I have the great honor and privilege of chairing today's event. I know there are so many ways that you could be spending your time this morning, so I want to thank each of you for choosing to spend it right here with us and in support of KidsQuest. And I promise you'll be delighted you came because we have a fantastic program coming your way. The business of learning. It's our theme for today's event. And sometimes to learn and to move forward, you have to go through some stuff. And I would say we have been through some stuff these past 20 months. So let's talk about that. An unprecedented global pandemic. It practically shattered our healthcare system. It shut down a good part of our economy. It sent most non-essential US workers home to work, and we lost people that we know and love. And a movement that demanded social and racial equity, challenging the status quo, forcing social change, and making just about every individual and business in America educate and take actionable steps on racial systemic racism, unconscious bias, and the oppression of BIPOC people in our country, in our communities, in our workplaces, and in our lives. So, if you're an employer, how did your employees react? How about your company? What policies were put in place? How did your businesses innovate quickly to react and survive? And what about us as individuals? How did we all listen to learn? And how did we change to heal? And most importantly, what did we learn from all of this? And how is 2020 going to make us better as businesses and as individuals? What will businesses look like post 2021? What innovations have been discovered? And will employers be more compassionate and more flexible? And will we all be more compassionate and more flexible? And what better organization than KidsQuest to lead this important discussion on learning? KidsQuest thrives on bringing the love of learning to children and families every single day. And we are so looking forward to having this collaborative community conversation with all of you this morning. So today we are going to hear from this amazing panel who represent some of the best and most innovative businesses in Washington State: Amazon, Alaska Airlines, the Seattle Kraken, and Mod Pizza. They are with us today. They are going to talk about how they all responded to these challenges in 2020 and 2021. And more importantly, what were the best practices that they are going to carry forward into the future? But before I introduce the panel, I want to thank our sponsors. And just a huge thanks to our presenting sponsor, Sterling Realty Organization, and to our partner sponsors, Aerojet Rocketdyne, Capstone Partners, Heritage Bank, Puget Sound Energy, Team Foster at Compass, and Washington Trust Bank, and all of our patron sponsors. And of course, I want to recognize our elected officials who are in the House today. Thank you for joining us all this morning. They are all listed in the chat to the right. And before I introduce the panel, I want to give a shout out to my fellow KidsQuest trustees. who have all done an incredible job this past year, these past 20 months for KidsQuest. This is one of the most outstanding boards that I have the honor of serving on. You all know who you are. You guys are the best. So thank you for your service this year. Okay, so here we go. Please help me welcome our distinguished panel. Pearl Leung, who is a Senior Manager of External Affairs at Amazon. Megan Ouellette, Managing Director of Government and Community Affairs at Alaska Airlines. Ali Svenson, Co-founder and Chief Purpose Officer at Mod Pizza. My guy, Jeff Webster, Vice President, Corporate Partnerships at Oakview Group, the Seattle Kraken, Climate Pledge Arena, and the incredible Putter Bert, who will serve as today's moderator. She's the president and CEO at KidsQuest Children's Museum. Putter, take it away.
Thanks, Tren. Oh, welcome everybody, and welcome panelists. It's great to be on this stage with you today. I have questions that I'm going to ask each of you, and we're just going to have a casual conversation and share what we've learned this year. All right, my first question is, the past 15 months have truly been like no other in our generation as far as impact on the way we have lived our lives and the way we have done business. Could you share with us how your organization or industry has been uniquely impacted over the past year? Jeff, let's start with you.
Sure, Putter. I think in the sports and entertainment industry, it's been maybe relatively obvious some of the early impacts, and probably the largest of which is no fans have been allowed into our venues, whether to watch music or watch sports or any other live event for that matter. And for our industry, without fans, there is no live entertainment or sports industry. So that's been a really tough one to get through, not only just revenue wise, but even just the spirit of our industry and what makes it all tick, which is the excitement that fans bring to all of those live events. You've had players and coaches testing positive for COVID-19 and the effects that has had just logistically. And you've also had even the NHL going to the extent of having to create and form new divisions and realign teams geographically. The challenges that Canada has posed in the NHL with having teams up there who literally can't cross the border. So they played an entire regular season just amongst themselves. Then on a more personal level, many of my friends in this industry, because of having no fans and because of the major reductions in revenue, have been laid off or had salary reductions or many other challenges that their teams or organizations have faced. And specifically us here in Seattle, the Seattle Kraken, we're this little startup in the midst of all of this stuff. And we've been trying to find our way throughout the process. We've hired, whereas our other counterparts amongst other leagues and teams are going backwards in staff, we've been hiring hundreds of people still during COVID because we had always planned on those expenses from our ownership group at this time. But what's happened is we haven't met any of these people. So we know them just as we all know you today, about the top quarter of them. And at some point, it's going to be like the first day of school when we all go to our new training center and meet the hundreds of people we've hired that we haven't met. And oh, by the way, in the middle of all this, we launched a team name and a brand and an arena name, and we did it all virtually. And we had to pivot those plans 100 different times, trying to figure out how best to do it. And then in building our $1 billion new arena, we have had thousands and thousands of workers, men and women, on the site every day that we've had to keep safe during this time. And safety is always important on construction sites, but in a much new and different way throughout this period.
Jeff, I love that you describe yourself as this small startup. Megan, how has Alaska been affected?
Yeah, so I would say relate to many of Jeff's comments. I'll just briefly set the stage that in January of 2020, pre-COVID, of course, Alaska Airlines was poised for growth. We had our Virgin America acquisition and integration behind us. We had new employee uniforms, opened a new lounge at SeaTac, a great balance sheet, so ready to rock and roll. And then COVID hit, and demand for air travel just plummeted to historically low levels. And I wanted to just bring forth a few data points to really drive that point home. Passenger levels were down 95% year over year at the lowest point, which was April of 2020. And pre-COVID, we flew about 130,000 passengers a day. And in the low point of 2020, we flew 4,000 passengers a day. So if you think about, we have 22,000 employees, that math doesn't work out so well. That's sort of the stark reality of what we were facing, not surprisingly, and so many other businesses as well. But we really focused, laser-like focus on controlling what we could control to weather this unprecedented storm. And part of that was adjusting the size of our company to meet this much reduced demand. So we worked very well with our labor unions, and it was pretty amazing. We had 10,000 employees who took voluntary leaves of absence or early retirements to essentially save jobs, because we needed to be able to ramp back up when travel came back. I would say, not surprisingly, our really prominent areas of focus throughout this pandemic has been health and safety. And it's interesting because for years, Alaska has been a leader in flight safety and operational safety. Think the FAA, right? We had to apply sort of that same rigor and discipline to public health safety. So we learned quickly. We worked with really smart people at UW who, specialize in infectious disease work. We put in place more than 100 different actions to keep people safe. And we sort of packaged that all up under what we call our next level care program. And you're familiar with many of these things. The mask policy, which we hope at some point can go away, our HEPA filtration on board our aircraft, touchless technology, enhanced cleaning, all the things if you've flown that you've seen, front and center. But I have to mention one of the most, I'd say, uplifting things that we did throughout this. And if you live in Seattle, you saw this probably, umpteen times, but the Alaska Airlines safety dance commercial, which the song is just so great, right? You just can't help but like the song. And I think that it was really special to have our employees be the people front and center in that commercial and driving home the point of safety, but also making you smile at the same time. So I think that was a big success for us. And then just as I sit here today, we're turning a corner. More people are flying. We're hopeful. We're investing in our fleet, our Boeing fleet. We're adding routes. We joined One World. So things are looking up, but certainly still, challenges ahead.
Thank you, Megan. And as someone who has had to fly back and forth to the East Coast to see my family, I really thank Alaska for all the safety precautions that you have put in place. At KidsQuest, I never imagined a building with no children in it in my wildest dreams. And like many people, we closed our building on March 13th. But, I have an incredible team that works thinking about the community first, and they didn't skip a beat. We made decisions that we would be forward-facing in our public programming and that we would remain a sustainable organization because we needed to be here today and tomorrow. So through a combination of virtual programming and real materials, we offered programming not only in the Puget Sound region, the Bellevue area, but across the country. And that was really, really impactful for children and on our team. I just can't thank the people at KidsQuest enough. They're just an incredible group. Okay, of course I just hit my thing too fast. All right, Pearl. In your new role at Amazon, how has the pandemic impacted community engagement and corporate giving?
Yeah, thank you, Petter. Well, the pandemic has certainly created challenges in the traditional community engagement, but certainly it created a lot of critical needs in our communities and opportunities for Amazon to leverage its unique assets. And so I think it created this opportunity to think creatively. So one of the first things that we did when many cities were mandating stay-at-home measures, and a lot of food banks, a lot of and similarly a lot of schools where a lot of students on free and reduced lunch relied on schools for meals. a lot of those services didn't have the means to deliver food to households. And so we staff at Amazon, we lean on our logistical expertise, and we're able to deliver more than 12 million meals to people in need in 25 cities across America. And here locally, that included 73,000 meals to 27,000 elderly and medically vulnerable residents, working with the King County Housing Authority and Seattle Housing Authority. And similarly, one of the things that I was super proud of when I first joined Amazon was how quickly we were able to stand up SuperVax vaccine events. We literally turned one of our meeting centers in downtown Seattle and worked with the state and worked with Virginia Mason Franciscan Health into pop-up vaccine events. So that was another opportunity where, not something that we traditionally did, but it certainly created that opportunity. And that was one opportunity where we were able to get Amazon volunteers, and working with community volunteers, we surpassed 50,000, administering 50,000 vaccine shots. So that's tens of thousands more people who are eligible for the lottery today. So good luck to everyone who's been vaccinated. And so we've been able to share that playbook with others to set up their own vaccination events. And similarly, when the State Department of Health was overloaded with wait times for up to an hour of backlog for the COVID-19 for information hotline, we deployed Amazon Connect technology. That's the same technology that powers Alexa, and we were able to eliminate the caller wait times and process over 100,000 calls. So I think, and one last thing is, during the pandemic, sure, we weren't able to meet in person, but it certainly it doesn't prevent companies from corporate giving. And that was the second part of your question. And I think that corporate giving part is so important, because that was what organizations struggling, needed cash the most. So I think in that respect, it really, that didn't impact that side of the work. And so here on the East Side, we, like you mentioned, saw how so many community-based organizations did not skip a beat in serving vulnerable populations, many who were disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, while they were struggling themselves to fundraise and keep their staff safe. So with that, we donated $2 million, $1 million last year and $1 million this year, to the City of Bellevue's Human Services Fund to distribute that funding to more than 40 nonprofits across the East Side. So I'll stop there, but I think overall the pandemic has actually really motivated and united our employees in the company to be creative of being part of the solution and being there for our neighbors and our communities.
Thank you so much, Pearl. You've done amazing work. I just can't thank you enough. Okay, we're going to switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about the impact on our employees. What challenges and learnings have happened in your organization related to workplace culture, building community, and supporting our employees during the pandemic? I know for me, while I have always been very close to my team, I felt like I had their lives in my hands, whether or not they were going to get a paycheck or not. And that was really, really challenging for me. Allie, Mod is not just a restaurant, but a company with a very diverse workforce. How were you able to support your employees during this time?
Oh, gosh. Well, Mod exists to serve people, and we always start by, focusing on how we can best serve what we call our Mod Squad. And when the pandemic hit, we had approaching 10,000 members of the Mod Squad around the country. And even though we've grown quite a bit over the last decade plus, we still consider ourselves, a small startup family business. every member of the Mod Squad is part of our family. So it was terrifying. And part of how we reacted was just getting right to work on the most practical and obvious needs. Mod has 2 platforms from which we impact. We employ people and we feed people. And for the people that we're able to employ, anytime they work a shift, they're provided a meal. And for many of the members of the Mod Squad, that might be the best meal of their day. And we know that. So when the restaurants are closing and nobody can go into dining rooms and people don't have their shifts, our immediate fear was there are going to be a lot of hungry people. And so we very quickly adjusted our meal program and offering and actually extended it. We made sure that every member of the Mod Squad knew that even if their location was closed or their shift was canceled, they could go into any mod and be fed, and they could bring any member of their family. We didn't want anybody to be hungry. We just opened that up at the beginning, and it's actually still in place. So that was a practical way in which we looked and said, what are the fundamental needs? Our company, you know, we're all about building community, and the sense of community was so at risk immediately when everything happened. We did very quickly find new ways to connect. We have a platform that we use to communicate called Beekeeper, and we started to focus heavily on making sure that, you know, every member of our team can access this platform. And we began to really think about what we were saying on Beekeeper and what stories were being shared and how we were offering up help and getting people more connected in ways that we hadn't before. Our team huddles, our all company huddles, we started to do all sorts of things virtually, as everybody did. And you know, in hindsight, we're better for it. You know, I think those huddles became something that what we said and what was shared was so important and needed for all of us. We knew, and we've always known, that all of the answers and the needs of our business, it all exists out there in the field, and the people of Mod will tell us what is going on, what is needed, what the opportunities are, what the struggles are. And that's been happening over the last year plus like never before. So, you know, we've had all sorts of sort of listening circles and forums where we could really hear what are the needs, what's going on, where are people hurting, and what more can we do. The issue of mental health became so urgent and such a highlighted area of need for the people of Mod. And we did what we could with them. We have some incredible partners around the country that we work with. We had some mental health, you know, well-being webinars and brought in our partners to help share information and provide resources and answer questions. And we worked really hard in that area. We have a lot of folks who are in recovery, and again, inspired by an incredible member of the Mod Squad, he came forward and said, you know, a lot of people are hurting. We need to do more. We need to help facilitate connection for the people that are in recovery. And we looked into trying to do that in all of our restaurants, and there were all sorts of reasons why that couldn't happen. But what ended up happening and what's going on still today is a really dynamic virtual support group and meetings that are happening week in and week out, just creating new senses of, you know, community and how people can get support. We always talk about, you know, we feed people, but we really mean much more than pizza and salads. It's about nourishing and being in service and taking care of people. So we had to think a lot about how to do that when we couldn't do it in the typical ways. So we did build the business to feed and employ people, and we had to do a lot of work this last year to figure out new ways of doing that. But the inspiration continues. You know, we hear stories through, whether it's on Beekeeper or just the messaging. I think people are much more open and comfortable sharing from their various communities what is going on. And we've asked for that because it's how we learn new things that we can do, and reminding the members of the Mod Squad that are out there, please use the platform of Mod to help take care of your communities. So a lot of really cool stories have been coming in on how people have been innovating out there to do that. But it all starts with the most fundamental things, and the feeding program is the first thing that comes to mind. And then some of the just more, you know, how do you create community and connection during a time when there's so much isolation and you're worried because, we love everybody that's out there and had to find new ways to take care of each other.
Ellie, I think your biggest words right there were community and connection. And I think everyone on this panel, that's their focus. And I just really thank you for all of your work. It's really warms my heart. However, 2020 was not only marked by a pandemic, but it was also a historic time for racial justice movements. How has your company's learning around race, equity, and social justice changed over the past year? And what were your challenges? What are your challenges? And what progress are you most proud of? Megan, let's start with you.
Thanks, Putter. It's a good and tough question. I would say last summer, like for so many of us, it was definitely a time of reflection for our leadership team and employees generally at Alaska. I would say we've always believed that every person deserves respect and deserves to feel like they belong. And yet we really had to take stock and see, well, there's a lot we need to do to make that a true reality at our company, both for our employees and our guests. So we did listening sessions like other businesses did last summer with our Black employees in particular. Our CEO, Brad Tilden at the time, led those. We learned a lot from them. They were tough. Some of the things were really tough to hear. We, those sessions helped inform basically some very specific commitments and goals that we've now made in 2 areas. So one is increasing racial diversity at all levels within our company. So making sure that our leadership ranks are as diverse as our frontline workforce. We have work to do there. And then also in culture, specific commitments around making sure we have a culture that people feel like they belong. We've got measurable, there are metrics attached to these. We're going to be accountable. But one thing that I'm proud of, and you all may have seen perhaps some news on this, is something unique that we did. We used one of our valuable assets, an aircraft, and we painted it what we call a special livery, which is basically a paint design on the aircraft. We call the plane our commitment plane, and we unveiled it back in April, so just a few months ago. And it was really inspired by our Black employees. And the plane, hopefully you'll see it out if you're flying. It basically includes the profiles of the children of our Black employees. It includes a Martin Luther King Jr. quote that the time is always right to do what is right. And it also highlights our Alaska's longstanding partnership with UNCF, which I'm sure you all are familiar with. It's an organization that supports HBCUs across the country. So we're proud of the plane. It's going to fly throughout our system for 10 years. It'll take you from point A to point B, but we also want to do some fun things with it. Take kids on college tours and things like that. And it's I hear our new CEO Ben talk about the fact that this is a visible reminder to us of what we said we're going to do on those commitments I referenced. So I think that's important too.
Thanks, Megan. It's really, that plane is so cool.
Thank you.
Jeff, when I think of hockey, I don't actually think of diversity. Can you talk a little bit about the work that the Kraken has done?
Yeah, absolutely, Putter. And as I ease into that, I'll first say, Megan, I so wholeheartedly agree. That airplane is amazing. We were with Ben recently, and that was like probably more than half of the conversation that we had with him. For any of the listeners, you may deduct the fact that we are potentially working on another cool airplane with our partners at Alaska, but this one very quickly rose to the top as being the best that I've seen. So, and I look around at this panel and even Trinity, who introduced us earlier, and like, how fortunate are we as a new sports team, a new venue in this beautiful city, to be surrounded by companies with leadership like Mod and like Alaska and Amazon and Symetra on this particular issue, Putter, because a lot of times these brands, they align with us and partner with us because of the equity that we can bring to them from the sports and entertainment marketing standpoint. But really, we look at it both ways. The equity that they bring to us is unbelievable. And the leadership in this region and in this city in particular on important and difficult issues in the corporate environment is really, really inspiring. It's something we think about every day. And so we're fortunate to get to learn from these incredible people who are on this call, and a lot of their colleagues who we work with every day at their amazing companies. And we're sort of, as I mentioned earlier, the little sports startup that could. And so how amazing to follow in a lot of their footsteps. And so I really mean it when I say that the equity we get to borrow from others in these challenging circumstances. But in particular, Putter, on your question related to hockey, you're right. And it's not, so hockey, it's kind of twofold. It's in many sports, you look at the front office of a professional sports team, and it very rarely ever mirrors the athletes that you see on the field in terms of racial diversity and equity, et cetera. But then in hockey, you almost have sometimes a twofold challenge where even the players themselves don't represent a ton of diversity. They may be from all different continents and countries, as hockey is played all over the world. But certainly from our standpoint, we've had an opportunity as building this thing from scratch. We've gotten to imagine and think about how do we want to do it? And that goes for building our brand, building our fan base, building our arena and that experience, but also building out our team. And we don't have as cool of a name as the Mod Squad. We got to work on that. But from the very beginning, and I give all the credit to our CEO, Todd Lywicki, but then also Mari Harita and many others who we've hired along the way who have made diversity, equity, and inclusion, not just sort of something we stamp on a wall somewhere or in a handbook, but literally like an everyday thing that is a core value of who we are. And you see it in our staff and the way that we're made up. We haven't been quiet on this issue since the beginning. And we are at over 45% women in our front office. We have 25% BIPOC representation in our staff, and those numbers will grow. And those numbers are the highest in our league and the highest in many leagues. And we don't need a gold star for that. That's made us better, way better by doing that. And we put our money where our mouth is. We're compensated in terms of across our whole organization with some of the ways that we hire and who we target for those hirings, because it's not always easy to find the right candidates in some of those roles. But we've tried hard and we've found incredible people who've made us better. But back to the point of hockey and maybe the participation in hockey, it's an expensive sport. It costs a lot of money to play, primarily because there's not a lot of rinks. And unless you live in Canada or in the Northeast or parts of the Midwest, you can't just go freeze your backyard and go skate on it. You have to have a facility to go to. And here in particular in Seattle are places where the NHL hasn't been before. Those rinks and those facilities are few and far between. So the ice time gets very expensive. The equipment is expensive. There's travel required. You see a lot of the new training facilities in the NHL, or those rinks that I just referenced, the community ones, a lot of them are built out in the suburbs, and they're built in places that maybe don't reflect the type of diversity that we would like in our sport. And so we planted our flag firmly in the city of Seattle. Our training center will be located at Northgate. It was much more expensive to do that than it would have been to build it out somewhere in the suburbs where there's lots more land. But we did that for a very specific reason, to provide access to kids who otherwise maybe wouldn't be able to learn the sport. The light rail is now going to let off immediately adjacent to our training center. We have 3 rinks, so it's not a place where you need special access in order to come in. All of our Kraken practices will be free and open to the public. So when a child is in there, or an adult or anyone for that matter, learning to skate or playing in a league or a game, they can walk right over after their practice onto the first rink and watch our team play and create this incredible connection. And so the training center has been community focused and diversity focused and access focused from the very beginning. The first tenet of our entire operation at our training center is the Washington Wild, the largest girls organization in the state of Washington. They will play every practice, every game. When you walk in our training center, you will see girls on that ice every day. And that's something that we're super passionate about, and that we made a really deliberate effort to seek out. And in the midst of COVID, when everyone was struggling with various issues, we found a way to actually start a new master's degree program at Seattle University that's specifically focused on diverse candidates and diversity in the sports and entertainment industry. We're able to get the other teams in the market to actually join our efforts. So now it's backed by the Mariners and Seahawks and Sounders and others. So I could go on and on. There's faces to this for us. We've hired the first African-American broadcaster in the history of the NHL, and Everett Fitzhugh, who's just a totally awesome guy, and has quickly become the voice of the Kraken. We've also hired Cami Granado, who's the first ever female scout in the history of the NHL. She's also, by the way, a Hall of Famer and a complete badass. So like, she should be a scout for us, and for any other NHL team for that matter. So if you can tell, I get passionate about this because it's a topic our industry has struggled with for a while, and we just get this unique chance to start from scratch and kind of try to do it the right way.
Jeff, thank you so much for all of that, because really, really cool. And I don't know if you saw in the chat, but someone suggested the Kraken crew.
There you go. Perfect. I'll tell our marketing team.
At KidsQuest, this is certainly a very large topic. Not only do we have a race and social justice committee, but we really are committed to looking at this topic holistically. What's in our museum store? Who are our vendors? The books in our story tree, who are the authors and who's telling those stories? So not only are we committed to diversifying our staff and board, but really looking at it through a lens as it reflects the entire museum. It is very, very important to us. Pearl, can you tell us about Amazon's efforts around equity, inclusion, and social justice?
Yeah, sure, Petter. Well, before I jump in, I just want to say kudos to Jeff and the Seattle Kraken, because I've just heard a lot of great feedback from the community, completely unsolicited, on your work on equity and diversity. And so kudos on that. And I do look forward to when the arena opens and we get to go to games. That's going to be really exciting. Light at the tunnel, a long tunnel in the last 15
the
plus
long
months.
tunnel.
Yes. So there's no question that there's a lot of work and continued learning ahead of us as a nation, as a company, and as a community. And I personally have been grateful that the past year has really opened up more dialogue in the workplace about racial equity than I've ever experienced in my career. That it's been conversations company-wide, not just in your community or philanthropy parts of the organizations or of companies. And although I've only been at Amazon for less than 6 months, I've been blown away by the diversity of my colleagues. It's actually one of the most diverse, racially diverse companies that I've ever worked in. And I've also been really pleasantly surprised at how genuine the company is in its commitment to building a more inclusive and diverse Amazon. So I'll touch on some specific things we're doing. But actually, I wanted to share a personal anecdote of how I came to Amazon. So last summer, during the height of protests after the killing of George Floyd, I came up with this idea to start the Black Business Equity, to start a Black Business Equity Fund to support local small Black-owned businesses. And I approached my good friend, Ollie Garrett, the president of Taper 100, a Black economic and empowerment nonprofit, to launch the fund. And so I was brainstorming donors. And so I reached out and pitched the idea to Amazon to be one of the first donors to invest in a fund, and they were the fastest company to commit and came in at the top level. And so that was when I knew that, Amazon was really serious about its commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it meant a lot to me personally. And Symetra was also a donor. So thank you, Trinity, and Beth in the audience. And I skipping the middle parts, by the end of the year, I started my new job at Amazon. So the Black Business Equity Fund has so far given over $460,000 to local Black-owned businesses, and Taper 100 continues to provide technical assistance to applicants to ultimately help bridge the wealth gap. Affordable housing crisis is another area where we know that people of color are disproportionately impacted. And in response to that, and this was something that Amazon had been working on for some time, we launched our Housing Equity Fund this year, committing more than $2 billion to preserve existing housing and create new inclusive housing through below market loans and grants. But the part of that fund that I am most excited about is that there will be cash grants awarded specifically to minority-led organizations. And I've worked in the field of construction and development for almost 15 years, and I know just how much room and how much work there is to really be more inclusive in that industry. And so really having the capital to help small contractors grow and help build that pipeline of minority-led, affordable housing developers is really critical and needed in our region. So going back to what we're doing within the company, Amazon's Senior VP of HR, Beth Galletti, announced earlier this year that for the second year in a row that we will set company-wide goals to double the number of US Black employees at the director and VP levels year over year from 2020. And that's after Amazon met our 2020 goal of doubling its representation of Black directors and vice presidents. And representation really matters, especially at the top of the organization. And this is an area we know we have a lot of work to do still. But where I think, just like Megan mentioned, we're holding ourselves accountable, and the change isn't going to happen overnight. But what's important is that we're posting our workforce data and progress publicly on aboutamazon.com. And so anybody can log on and track our progress by job types year over year. And I think that's really how we will, one job at a time, change the representation throughout our company. And we have similar goals on women representation and across the board in different levels throughout the company. And that even goes to our interns. And this is something that I know it really is relevant to KidsQuest work. It's the work around STEM education and how we can really put our muscle into supporting underrepresented youth and building that pipeline of software development engineers. So we have a goal of increasing our US Black software development engineer interns by at least 40% and globally reach 1.6 million underrepresented students through our Amazon Future Engineer program, which provides hands-on computer science project learning. But there's also a part of that is more than just the education piece. Earlier last month, we surprised 100 inspiring computer science students from underserved communities with each with a $40,000 scholarship and an Amazon internship offer. So it's really kind of the whole, the journey of it. And so this is just a slice of our work around equity, and I have no doubt that we will continue to really listen and learn, reflect, and evolve, and grow towards a more diverse and inclusive workplace.
Thank you, Pearl. That is really inspiring. I love how it just weaves through the whole corporation. For many of us, the pandemic has been a time of reevaluating our priorities, focusing on core values, and certainly much learning and adaptation. What rose to the top as clear priorities for you in the last year, and what will you carry forward in the future? I know at KidsQuest, we will look very different. This hybrid model is something that we will continue because it has allowed us to have a much broader outreach. It has allowed us to really pay attention to operating hours and when we can offer things. It really has given us the time and the space to look at community access in different ways. So from the lemons, I think we have found some lemonade. Allie, what's happening at Mod?
Well, our absolute priority has always been and continues to be to serve people. But when the pandemic hit, we had to get very creative very quickly to figure out how in the world to do that when suddenly all the dining rooms were shut. And the good news is it allowed us to tap into our entrepreneurial muscles and creativity. And my gosh, the first most kind of remarkable thing that happened at Mod that was not even on our roadmap was a whole curbside offering. That was not something that we'd been working on at all. And within a matter of weeks, it was clunky and messy and not, beautifully executed, but it was a curbside program that has evolved since and will continue. So that was some cool innovation that our team pulled together. Again, stripping down this basic, if we're going to serve people, how can we do that? So it was again, looking at the lemonade that's come out of the lemons, I would put that in that category. I think probably we always say and truly believe that challenge, some people say it creates character. We actually think it can reveal character. And through the process of the last year and a bit, the character of the people of Mod out there, their commitment to serve and to be a force for good, and find ways to do that in their various communities was absolutely astonishing and completely inspiring to us. So we've continued all year long to respond to the acts of kindness that we've seen out there, where a team in the Bay Area every Friday, we find out after the fact, takes 100 pizzas to the nurses at their local hospital. These kind of things that were going on everywhere. It's given us a chance to respond to that and say, that is why we exist. That is service. That is taking care of people. And that's the whole purpose of this business. So please do more of that. So I think that our purpose has always been there. I think going forward, it's been so, we've had to engage with it so deeply and talk about it so much that I think it's stronger. And I think people are understanding and feeling empowered to use their platform out there in whatever market they're working in to figure out what they can do with what they've got to help somebody. And that we will carry forward, and we're better for it.
I love that. I think better for it is a phrase we're going to hear a lot. Mm-hmm. Jeff?
I love the word Allie uses, and she can't answer without saying it, the word serve. And it's so cool because I think that says a lot about who she is, who her company is. And that is probably the word that I think of when answering a question like this in particular. I think we try to, our CEO often says that if we don't make our community better by being here, then why bother? So if you look at his track record of the different teams he's been with, community has always been at the center of what the team has stood for and its purpose. I think that has become an even deeper mission for us over the past year. I think it will continue to be, but it's not only how we serve the community, it's how can we serve our fans, how can we serve our partners, How can we serve our teammates? And I think we've learned to listen a lot more and maybe understand what others are going through. And it's been more obvious in the past year. Some of Megan's comments about the statistics that challenged Alaska were maybe out there in the news and not difficult to derive that the airline industry was facing challenges, but everyone's facing challenges every day. And oftentimes I don't think we think about those enough. I think we think more about ourselves. And so we have tried to show up in the hard times and tried to show up by being a great partner to help others, even maybe while we're struggling. And that leads me back to the word of service that I love so much. So I think we're going to continue focusing on those things. It's not for the faint of heart to build what we've been building, but to focus on others throughout that process has been key.
Thanks, Jeff. Megan, some thoughts?
Sure. Well, to start, Ellie, I think you said it well, that challenges reveal character. I think that is definitely true at Alaska Airlines. We sort of double down on what we do best, and what our core values are. So I'll just highlight a few quick examples of that. So one of them, practical but super important, we learned the value of having a strong balance sheet and being rigorous cost managers. We came into the pandemic in a strong financial shape after years of running our business in a fiscally responsible manner. Now, not so fiscally responsible that we could withstand a pandemic without some federal aid, but we were in better shape than we otherwise would have been, which enabled us to be nimble and really seize opportunity. As I mentioned, I think earlier, we're buying Boeing aircraft, we're adding routes, we joined One World. So these are all things that are important that after those years of being fiscally responsible. Second example would be we always have been, safety has always been the core value. Without it, we're not an airline. We can't serve guests well. And I think that we applied, as I mentioned earlier, that same mindset, rigor, discipline to this public health safety realm, and we'll continue to do that going forward. And then the third one has been touched on really well by Jeff, the importance of communities. I've been with Alaska for almost 17 years. And, when I tell people I work for Alaska, they always say, I feel very fortunate, I love Alaska Airlines. And I think part of why they love Alaska Airlines is we have awesome flight attendants, but also we are part of our communities. We do help the community. And I think that even though during the heart of COVID, we were burning cash like crazy, we used our aircraft to fly medical professionals across the country, fly PPE, fly vaccines to remote villages in the state of Alaska. And that felt really good. So that's something obviously we'll continue to do going forward in terms of investment in our communities. Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Megan. Pearl, can you specifically talk about the role of corporations and community today, and how it's different from a year ago, and how we can help the community heal together? I think we have healing to do.
Yeah, wow. That's a really good question and a lot to unpack there. And I want to echo what Megan just said. I'm a loyal Alaska Airlines customer because of Alaska's work in the community. So thank you for that. I think first, the pandemic has made us all realize that we're in the same boat together. We're part of an ecosystem. There's no way around that, nor do we want to have a way around that. I think the second is that the past year has really laid bare the deep racial inequities that continue to plague our country, and the pandemic only exacerbated that. So in terms of the role of corporations in the community today, I think many companies and corporations have stepped up in big ways to support nonprofits and their community, as we heard from my fellow panelists. And I think in addition to doing the right thing and being a responsible corporate citizen, I think it really made us all realize how much that supporting local nonprofits and small businesses, because they play a significant role in our employees and our customers' lives. And that really, that this last 15 months, that those organizations were under real threat of shuttering for good. And I think that was a wake-up call for a lot of companies when they realized that if these community assets go away, that we as a society we would be in deep trouble. So I hope corporations continue to embrace this role of being truly a part of the fabric of communities where they do business, and continue with the same urgency as when we were in the height of the pandemic. And I think ultimately healing will come from continuing to earn and build trust together, and that really comes from us being there for each other when it matters. And I think it's also being tuned into what communities' needs are. And that was where I was really impressed with KidsQuest and how, Pata, you and your team were so tuned into the community's needs, and that you were able to pivot so quickly during COVID to provide those free learning kits, online classes, the playbooks, that really focus on addressing that educational and access gap, working with King County Housing Authority and public libraries to serve underserved families. And I think you were able to do that because you had worked years to build those relationships and that trust and earn that trust with underserved communities. And that's how you were able to pivot quickly to know where the needs are. So, and that's where I felt KidsQuest really made my work easier, because I was able to learn from your experience and tap into what you're doing in the community, and know that by supporting KidsQuest, we're not, Amazon's not only supporting a beloved community asset, but really helping the needs in families' lives. So I think that's an example of the types of partnerships that really can help and help healing in our community. And I think if we can do more partnerships like that, I'm very optimistic that we will come out of this pandemic stronger together.
Thank you, Pearl, and thank you for your incredibly kind words about the work that the museum has done and will continue to do. I want to thank all of you for our conversation today. I have learned so much. I want to thank everyone else for joining us this morning. I hope you enjoyed listening to this panel discussion and learning together. In addition to being, sorry, I moved my thing too fast, the joys of technology. I hope you enjoyed listening to the panel conversation and learning together. In addition to being a platform for community conversations and connections, BizQuest serves as a critical fundraiser for KidsQuest Children's Museum. The past 15 months have been incredibly challenging for KidsQuest, and we made it through, despite an 11-month closure of the building and a nearly $2 million revenue loss. We did it by doing what KidsQuest does best, putting our community first, innovating, and firmly believing that play is critical to the healthy social and emotional well-being of children. And we need your help. This is where I get emotional. We need your help to continue to provide educational resources for children and families. As a community, we need to heal, and it's going to take all of us to do so. Please consider making a donation to KidsQuest before you leave the event today. You can open the chat and click on the link or donate now on our website. As I sit in front of you here today, I can't thank you enough. On behalf of everyone at KidsQuest Children's Museum, we value your time and we are truly grateful for your support. Thank you, all of you. Thank you, panelists.